Hello and welcome. My name is Mary and I'm the host of Prologues, a lifestyle podcast where each episode is like a digital journal entry detailing whatever it is I'm going through in life at the moment. I talk about my journey with mental health, relationships, wellness, beauty, personal development, and more. So join me every Monday morning for a reminder that we're all still figuring out life for the first time and you are still in the beginning of your personal story. Welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I'm interviewing my friend Gabby. You might know her as Scotland Magic on Instagram, and she's also the founder of the Main Character Club. She's a professional photographer, a small business owner, and another Edinburgh transplant just like me. And in today's episode, we talk all things being a long-distance daughter, starting over, the courage to leave situations that you know aren't good for you, the ups and downs of owning your own business, and general life lessons that Gabby has learned along the way. Her story is so interesting. I find her to be an inspiring individual in my life, so I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to the podcast, Gabby. Thank you so much for coming on Prologues. Can you tell my listeners a little bit about yourself?
So, as Mary said, my name is Gabby. Should I look there? Should I look at you?
You can look at me.
I can look at you. Okay, cool. So my name is Gabby. I've been living in Scotland for 4.5 years now. I run a business that has two kind of aspects to it, photo shoots and events. Moved over from Australia, and I'm just living my best life in Scotland, essentially. So that's probably the roughest outline of who I am and what I do.
I feel like you're downplaying it a little bit. You moved all the way from Australia to Scotland. I looked that up. That's over 10,000 miles.
It's far. Yep.
And what's the time
30
difference?
hours in transit. It's like a 12-hour time difference from I think Perth, and then Sydney's slightly different because I've got family in both. So yeah, it's far. It's decent.
Far.
Yeah.
I thought I moved far, but you moved really, really far.
Really, really far.
And when she says she has a business or businesses, they are massive and growing every single year, constantly leveling up and doing so well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a wild journey. I think I've always been somebody who's been entrepreneur minded. I've worked in a ton of jobs before, but always felt inclined to do my own thing and just have always loved that. And I had a business in Australia, and then when I decided to move over here, I just was like, let's pivot again, let's do it. I've done that a lot in the business. It's changed, it's had a huge kind of journey, but I really feel like with the Main Character Club and the shoots, I'm in my thing now. I feel like there's a lot of faffing about trying to find what really, really sat with me. And I think I've gained a ton of skills and experiences from all these other businesses for it to finally be in a place where I'm oh, this is my thing. And I think it took the move over here for it to be launched in a new country, for it to really become what it was meant to be. So it's exciting. Yeah. I feel like I always downplay it because it's very new still, it's only, the Main Character Club's only 1.5 years old and the shoots have been running for 3 years, but it's still quite a new business. So sometimes I kind of, and when it's your own thing, your perception of it's very different to other people's perception. So.
And we're women, and we're taught to downplay our successes.
Exactly. Why we like this? And I'm Australian, so it's tall poppy syndrome. We're oh, it's just a little thing that we do. It's not a big deal. So trying to work on that.
I feel like when you meet Gabby and you talk to her, you can tell you are walking in alignment. You're so passionate about what you do and you just feel so settled in yourself and you know who you are, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah, thank you. Again, I think it's been it's an ongoing journey. And I think even though as well, the perception of it again is people seeing it from the outside. It's really interesting to hear you say it in that way, especially because we haven't known each other for really long as well. I always think that's kind of interesting how people perceive it from the outside. It's oh wow, she's got her shit together, she knows what she's doing, she's running this business, and I'm just flying by the seat of my pants and hoping for the best, just doing what feels good. But I guess that is alignment, isn't it? Doing what feels good and just keep following that feeling. And I think being a self-employed person is about enjoying what you're doing and finding joy in your work and passion and fulfillment. And so I think that's probably where that comes from. It's just constant adjustment till it was quite just right. So yeah.
Definitely. So on Prologues before, I've spoken a lot about being a long distance daughter. And I had a whole episode when we fully decided to move to Scotland in 2023 called Long Distance Daughter Guilt, where I talked about the duality of the emotions that you have to process when going through this, because you're so excited, you're accomplishing a dream, you're doing something that most people will never get to do, to be honest. In the same time, you have to leave your entire world and everything you've known. You have to completely learn a new culture. I know we're in an English-speaking country, but every single day I walk out of my house and I feel like people are speaking a different language. Yeah. And so you had a crazy move. Over 10,000 miles, 12-hour time difference, vastly different culture.
Yeah.
What gave you the courage to completely reinvent yourself and start over like that?
I think when I decided to move, that was never the intention. It wasn't about reinvention. It was just, I've always wanted to live overseas. I've traveled a lot since I was really, really young, and I've always been fiercely independent. So I love my family. I have a great relationship with them. But ever since I was young, as I said, I was born in Perth. We moved to Sydney. I've flown all over Australia from a really young age. Like I think I started flying by myself since I was 4 years old. So I'm
Mhm.
very, very familiar with being by myself a lot. And when I hit kind of 16 and could start traveling, that's when I started to get the bug and start to feel like, oh, this is really great. And I feel like the best version of myself when I'm away from home, which is a hard thing because Australia is a beautiful country. You know, it's gorgeous. And that's the biggest thing that people come back to me. They're like, oh, how could you leave like sunny, hot,
Mhm.
beautiful Australia? But I never, like, it was always, I feel very privileged to live in a country that is, you know, an incredible place, but just never felt that maybe inspired or that motivated as much as I do now, having the contrast to see like the difference between two countries. But I think there's a lot of things that led up to that move, but I wanted to move when I was 20. So
Mhm.
I didn't want to go to university, didn't want to work. I just wanted to maybe be a tour guide or a travel guide for like Kentucky or something and just travel the world and do that. And then I met a boy, and as you always do, meet a boy, and I decided to kind of pursue that instead. And that was
Mhm.
6 years of my life, you know, in another relationship. And
And that's a rite of passage.
yeah, I think we've all got to go through it. And it's so funny when you think about like your life and these kind of like these turning points of like, I could have gone this way or I could have
Mhm.
gone that way. But I very much believe in like the timing in your life is perfect. Everything happens when it's meant to happen. And so instead of going through my visa and doing that whole process at that age, I pursued the relationship and built some really strong foundations in my career and my entrepreneurial journey in Australia. And about halfway through that relationship, I was traveling again. I used to still just go by myself because I was really content traveling by myself and had that pull. I'm like, I want to move. I really want to move to the UK. Two of my closest friends who had done it, one who I thought would never leave the country, moved overseas. And I thought, if they've left, like, how could I not go? Like, I'm obviously putting something aside in myself for the sake of the relationship rather than like, what do I actually want to do? So it started to like create a bit of tension, bit of friction because the version of me that I wanted to be was like trying to break through, but like the polite, like, this is, you know, it's a safe journey, like to be able to stay in Australia, stay in
In
the
the part where it's
relationship.
like nothing's wrong on the
Nothing's wrong.
surface.
There was genuinely nothing wrong. Like, and I still say to this day, we've spoken about this before.
Yeah.
Like, I never want it to come across as like, oh, he was awful or whatever. We had a great relationship. It was just like
Mhm.
we just wanted really different things, and that's such a hard pill to swallow
Yeah.
when
When
things
nothing's
are
wrong on
nothing's
paper.
wrong.
When you can't pick out any one thing.
There's not one thing. It was just I really wanted to move, and he really didn't. And so, you know, flash forward so I sat in that for another 3 years, and I just really sat in it. And I came on another trip for my best friend's wedding, and something just kind of snapped in me, and I thought, I just need to move. And I said, if you don't want to come, then I need to go. And he didn't want to come, so I decided to go. So it was never really a decision of like redefining myself or like starting over. I just always wanted to move. And then now looking at my life now 4.5 years after that big move and seeing how much has shifted and changed, it's like, oh shit, like I actually did
Mhm.
completely redefine myself. Like my version of me now is so different, even to like just when I first moved here. Like it's kind of wild to think about, you know, the
Mhm.
polarity of me between then and now. So yeah.
Was there anything, like looking back in retrospect, was there any one thing that would have stopped you? Any one thing that you were especially nervous about, or were you just completely excited?
I think because I had built a really good business in Australia, I was nervous about the prospect of like the concept of me leaving behind a really established business. I had a thriving photography business there. I was earning really good money. Again, none of my friends or family or anything were self-employed. So I was really going against the grain in Australia and loved to prove people wrong. You know, people are like, well,
Mhm.
you can't leave that full-time job because what about this? And I was like, I thrive in that. I thrive in proving people wrong. So I was like, yeah, what can I do to like, you know, what am I going to lose by leaving that? And that was like one of the biggest fears. Obviously, not having my friends and my family and that as
Mhm.
well. But my family is so used to me just not being at home. It
Around.
wasn't that huge of a difference for them to a degree. But I just felt the pull so hard. I just thought I need to do this for whatever reason. And I always trust, like, things don't always make sense. So I don't understand why I want to do something, but like, I just trust the gut feeling and it's never led me astray. I've always ended up right place, right time because I followed that. And I've seen what the opposite effect is. And, you know, about that 3 years in when I was feeling I wanted to move but couldn't make the decision
3 years into the
into
relationship.
relationship. Yeah. And I knew I had this little, you know, this little sparkle. I'm like, I want to do it. I want to do it. But no, it's too scary. I've got this relationship, great friends, great job. Like, again, everything on paper is perfect. Why would I do that? My body started to manifest in resistance. So I started to get really bad nausea. So I had like ongoing nausea for 6 months and the doctors couldn't tell me what it was. And I just, you know, was like, couldn't understand what I was eating really well and everything was fine. Developed psoriasis. Then I started
Wow.
to gain a lot of weight and like just all of these things my body was literally forcing against me because I was ignoring it so much on the what my soul was kind of like yearning to do. So for me, it was like a no brainer. I'm like, I'm obviously feeling this pull and I've made this huge radical decision. And the fact as well, again, that so many people were saying, like, why would you? Like, what a terrible idea. I was like, the fact that everyone is so anti it, I don't know, kind of again fired me up to be like, I think we're on the right
A
path.
contrarian.
Yeah. But I know you felt the same as well, didn't you? Like, it was
Yeah.
it's the duality of it is so
I
intense.
feel
Like,
like the move was inevitable.
yeah, it
It
was just
was
going to
always
happen.
going to happen, and I don't know how, couldn't explain it. I've always wanted to do this since I was a young teenager, and I don't think I ever knew how, especially because no one from my hometown leaves.
Yeah.
People, especially I was raised in a really toxic, high control religious environment, so it was the norm to get married when you're very young, 18, 19, 20, immediately start having children and never leave your hometown. And I don't have any judgment in my heart for people who chose that path, but it wasn't my path. But I knew it wasn't my path from a young age. And because I had no one to look to who had set the example of leaving, I really had no idea how that was going to work out for me. But I think that I manifested it for 15
Yeah,
years
it's just
before it actually
brewing.
happened. And I say it was inevitable. I don't know how, didn't have a plan. It was just always going to happen. But it's hard, and I'm 8 months in currently, so
She's fresh.
I'm still fresh. So I feel like since the 6 month mark, I've started to feel a little bit more settled. I'm starting to meet friends on my own, develop more of a routine. I also love winter.
This is a
Scottish winters
great
are hard.
season. Yeah.
Scottish winters are really
The
hard.
sads are real.
Oh my God. Luckily, I'm already a winter lover, so that hasn't been awful.
Yeah.
But I think I've started to come into my own a little bit more now, but it's still, I can tell I'm not there yet.
Not
I'm still
there.
living in a little bit of the chaos.
Yeah.
So as we said, it's a bit of a rite of passage to have a relationship when you're younger that you're tempted to hang it all on.
Yeah.
And I imagine that there are a lot of people listening to this right now who have either had one of those or who might be in it
Currently.
still. Yeah. How did you really decide to leave the safety net of your comfort relationship? Because I'm assuming like you thought you were going to get married.
Oh, 100%. We were locked
You thought
in.
like this was your person.
Yeah.
And it's the saddest feeling in the world knowing that they've done nothing wrong.
Yeah.
But it's literally you. It's not me, it's you, except it actually
Actually
you.
is. Yeah, it's one of those rare occasions where it was like nothing, and it wasn't either of our like fault, or there was nothing kind of, I could have, if I think about my life, and as we often do, like kind of sit back and think about it, and I often think, God, what would my life have looked like? What would that have been if we had been together? And I don't think it would have been a bad life. It would have been a lovely life. And that's what made it so hard. And I do think, and it's a conversation that doesn't happen often, because again, I don't like to discuss it often because I never want to, come across the wrong way for him as well, like, or anything like that. But I have conversations with a lot of women like this, and they're in that scenario, in the exact situation, and they feel awful because there's nothing wrong, and their family make them feel like shit because of it. Their friends do, and because they can't quantify it and they can't explain it. And I think a huge part of like an undercurrent of what I do in my business and life and stuff is that seeing women, I want to see women thrive. I want to see them living their best life, and often that means leaving things that don't suit them, and they stay because it's the easy thing to do. Well, not easy, but it's what's expected. It's safe, and things like that.
It's familiar.
It's very familiar, and there's joy in familiarity. There's joy in comfort, and that safety and everything. But so it was, I think, because I was on the trip when I decided I need to end the relationship, which again is not the best way to do it, but I just had this overarching thing of like, if you don't do it now, you're going to go home, it's going to be comfortable, and you're just not going to do it. And I was living with him and his parents at the time too, so it was even harder because my whole life was intertwined with his, and I just had to like rip the band-aid and do it in that hit, and it was shit. Like, it wasn't, and this is the thing that probably frustrates me the most when people talk about dramatically changing their life, is they don't talk about the really shit side of it. And especially when, again, there's nothing wrong. If the relationship was shit, fair enough, because people can say, oh, he was awful, or this and that. It's a lot harder, and the job is good, and the life is good, like everything's good. Why do you want to like rock the boat and change the thing? And there's this, like, again, if I could go back and tell myself like there's going to be this really awkward, crappy period where you're going to feel like garbage, like, for a long time, and question yourself and think, did I do the right thing? All of that kind of stuff. Then like I wonder as well if I would still have made the decision. It was honestly, I feel like this other version of myself just took over and made the choice for me, because it kind of knew like, you're too comfortable, there's no way you're going to do this on your own. It was honestly an out of body experience. Like, reflecting upon it, I can't believe that I actually did it. And I often, well, my best friend and I, we were discussing this once, and we've been best friends for like 20 years, and we were playing We're Not Really Strangers, that card game. And the question that she was prompted for me was, what's something unexpected that I did like you never thought I'd do? And she goes, I never thought you would leave and like move and change your life. You were so settled in where you were. So it was like, yeah, it was such a bizarre, like, I don't know, kind of, especially because it's been a little while now, like since it happened. Like it was such a bizarre time in my life.
This
But
was 5 years ago.
5 years ago, yeah. So it was 2018, 2019, I think. Can't remember exactly, but it was.
So you were also young, mid
I
20s at
was
this point.
young. Yeah, I was 26, 25, 26 at the time. So it was quite like a funny time of life as well. You know, you really.
As someone who's currently
Yeah,
26,
welcome.
very funny time of life.
Very funny time of life. But yeah, I just think like looking back on it, honestly, it was just the weirdest, most bizarre kind of experience in my life. But like looking at it, I'm like, it's the best thing that I ever did because like the life I have now
Look
is
at you now.
crazy,
Also,
unbelievable.
not that you should make these decisions based on relationships, but you have a wonderful
I have
relationship
a
now.
wonderful relationship, like better than like I thought I could
Yeah.
have. You know, I thought, oh, this is my peak. Like I'm at like my last relationship, like it's never going to get better. And then you meet someone, you're like, oh my god, like we're so in sync with each other. I feel expanded by this person. I feel, you know, equally ambitious with this person, and we have such a great relationship, and our communication's down pat. And you know, when you're in this position of you're in a good relationship that you end, you think, oh, it's so perfect, and it is on paper very good. But when you see it in contrast, again, you can be like, oh, actually, here were some of the cracks that maybe weren't super obvious or not
Mm.
harmful or anything, like they weren't toxic. But in retrospect or looking at it, I'm like, oh, all of those values didn't actually align to my values. I was adjusting them for that person. I
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, my ambition's not that important. Or like starting business, it's all right. It's
I
I don't need
relate
to do
so
that.
heavily.
You know, like, isn't it funny how much you put yourself to the side
Mm-hmm.
to not rock the boat? And it is like, again, something that I notice in a lot of women, and a huge part of why I'm doing what I'm doing is to give them that permission slip. Or as you mentioned, growing up, you never saw somebody who did what you wanted to do. You had no blueprint to follow. So if we can like create a blueprint for other people for them to see it and go, well, if
Mm-hmm.
she did it, then I can do it. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
a safe space for me to do that. So it's very powerful to be able to take
Yeah.
the lead and do it.
One of the nicest comments that I ever get on social media is when people tell me that I'm their expander. Because I'm like, they have no idea how much that means
It's
to
so
me. As
special.
someone, like you said, who never had that modeled for them, getting to be
Yeah.
that for somebody else helps make it a little bit easier in the really difficult times.
Yeah, especially when you're, as you said, leading by example. It's always
Mm-hmm.
harder if you're the first person to do it in
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's always so challenging. So to be reassured
Mm-hmm.
by that, and as we were just discussing, again, I don't talk about the relationship, the leaving, like very often, but every now and then the conversation comes up, the story comes up, and like for people to be so reactive to that and be like, oh my god, like I needed to hear that,
Mm-hmm.
makes it worth it, makes that discomfort or anything kind of worth it, so that they feel, and it does it
Yeah.
can helps you like it inspires you to continue that conversation or continue leading the
Mm-hmm.
life that you're leading. You're like, okay, if I can help
Yeah.
somebody else through this, like it's worth it. It's worth the discomfort.
It is still that time of year where everyone is making their goals, setting intentions, and planning out their 2025. And so many of us, myself included, are thinking about how to best take care of their bodies and minds in the new year. I have personally been the most consistent in the gym that I've ever been because I've had this mindset shift that's made me realize at the end of the day, having a strong and active body just helps me complete my day to day activities. Whether that is carrying my groceries up Edinburgh's endless staircases and hills, or finding a rhythm on the saddle, or taking Fergus for a weekend hike. My constant companion on this fitness journey has been Element, my go to electrolyte supplement for the last year and a half. It's a powder drink mix that comes in flavors like raspberry, citrus, watermelon, mango chili, orange, and more, plus an unflavored. And if you love a salty treat, you will love this. Element is packed with a science backed ratio of electrolytes to help your body maintain optimal hydration levels, and it's vegan, paleo, and keto friendly. Also, I didn't know this until just now, but there are actually 47,000 5-star reviews on their website, and y'all know you can add mine to the mix. Whether I'm sweating it out on a reformer, dehydrated from that UK to East Coast flight, or nursing a hangover from the holidays, Element is there to rehydrate me. Plus, I find it to be delicious. I mix mine with 40 ounces of water and some lemon juice, and it is one of my favorite little treats. If you'd like to try Element, you can get a free sample pack with a purchase of a drink mix powder, which is the perfect way to find your favorite flavor. Just go to drinkelement.com/Mary Skinner. That's drinklmnt.com/Mary Skinner. Always consult your doctor before adding a new supplement to your routine. I'm willing to bet there are a lot of women in their 20s listening to this right now who are in that relationship currently. But also, when it comes to relationships, the most important relationship you could ever have is the one with yourself. And you
100%.
took a massive risk on yourself. And one of my favorite quotes is, if you're lonely when you're alone, then you're in bad company. And it sounds like,
Oh, I love that.
right?
That's a good one.
As an introvert, that really heavily speaks to me.
Yeah.
And as someone who likes to retreat, as we were talking about, who
Yeah.
likes to just peace out and disappear for a
Bye.
while, I feel like I'm always just trying to be someone that I enjoy hanging out with.
Yeah.
And you took a massive risk on yourself.
It was a big
Yeah.
risk. big risk, but it's paid off. And I love
High
my own
risk, high
company.
reward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the universe rewards the brave, right? I think
Mhm.
the bigger the jump, like the bigger the, like, you know, the reward as well. Like it's just, again, like I just look back on it and think, how did this happen? Like, you know,
Mhm.
it's kind of crazy, but I believe that in any aspect. But like, again, have that little shitty period, but like what comes on the other side of that is
Mhm.
unbelievable. And it's like, as you said, you're only 8 months into this at the moment, but you've already had some really amazing things happen. It's hard to fathom what's going to happen over the next year, 2 years, 4 years. That's the joy of it, the unpredictability. Like, oh my God, what could
Mhm.
happen? You know, when you're in your hometown and you're in your routine, I feel like there's only so much. You hit a glass ceiling. There's only so much that you have, like, that could potentially happen. But when you're in such a new environment, new country, like it's powerful. Like I'm excited for you. Like I'm like, what's gonna happen? What's next, girl? Like it's gonna be great.
I'm excited for myself, but I'm also trying to give myself a little bit more space and time. I have
There's no rush.
never cried in my life more than I cried in the first 6 months
Was it
living
just the
here.
homesickness, or like what was it, that
It was just the chaos of
the
it all.
chaos? Yes, just a
I
lot.
think I was in disbelief at times. I
Mm,
would so often cry out of frustration because I felt like I was getting things wrong.
yeah,
I would either not get the joke, not understand the thing someone was saying to me, even simple as I don't know what store to go to if I need this
the
thing,
store thing.
the store
The
thing.
store thing. So hard.
Have it literally just Googling what's the UK equivalent of this store?
Yep.
What's because I
Or the
don't know
product,
anything.
or yeah.
You walk out the door and I felt like I was speaking a different language or listening to other people speak a different language to me all the time. So I would cry out of
Mm,
frustration constantly. I hate being bad at things. I hate starting from zero.
yep.
And you
Starting
have
from
to.
ash. You
It
have to.
also took 4 months for our stuff to ship over from the US. And I realized I'm pretty materialistic
You
actually.
like your
I missed
things.
my things, just my stuff. I
Yeah.
moved over with what I could fit into 4 suitcases
Mm.
and little trinkets,
Trinkets, bits.
family heirlooms, pieces of pottery that my friends had made for me, or cards that my
Mm.
friends had written me, all the things that
Your
I
comfort things.
wanted. I
Yeah.
wanted to move over, but I couldn't justify putting them in the suitcases. I missed those so heavily. Homesickness, seeing, the first time one of my friends had a birthday and I wasn't there.
Yeah.
I turned 26 in July after I moved. So my first birthday being home or being away
Being away
from
from home.
home. I went back in September for New York Fashion Week, and then I went back in October for a brand trip and to go to LA for work. And I would just sob as soon as I stepped off the plane. And at passport control, they would say, "Welcome home." It would just be
Like
like,
sends you, yeah.
I'm gonna cry thinking about it right now. Just like constant tears, and I think also grieving a past version of myself that I know
Yeah.
I'll never be
That
again.
person.
I'll never
Yeah.
be that person again. And I'm trying to figure out right now the person that I'm becoming.
Mm.
So I'm just in the
Space
middle.
between.
I'm just in the middle. I feel like I'm an in between age. I'm in an in between phase of life, and it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And there's like magic comes from that.
Yeah.
There's magic in discomfort, you know.
I think I'm starting to see the threads of that now.
Mm.
One, I'm just a little bit more settled. I'm finding a little bit more of my routine. I've gotten a
Mm.
handle on my mental health a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to see a glimmer of what's to come. And I am excited. And
Yeah.
I keep reminding myself it's easy to question whether or not you've made a mistake.
Mm.
And so many times over the past 8 months, I've worried that I just made the biggest, most expensive mistake of
Of
my
your
entire
life. Yeah.
life.
You're like, shit, what have I done?
But something helpful is so many of the people I've met here have moved to Scotland from other countries. And everyone tells me, give it a
Give it
year,
a year.
2 years.
Yeah.
Minimum 1 year, maybe 2 years. And you can't really assess
You
until
can't.
after that mark. And so I'm so glad that I had people tell me that early on, because
Mm.
even through all the shit times, I've reminded myself over and over again, like, of course it's shit. It hasn't even been a year.
Hasn't even been a
It
year.
hasn't even been 6 months. Hasn't even been a year.
Yeah.
And I just keep reminding myself
Yeah.
of that.
And it will just get like, I think what happens is, you know, you're saying the stores and like this mental load that comes with having to figure stuff out all the time that you've grown up your entire
It's
life
exhausting.
understanding. It's exhausting. Like when we got insurance for our car, like Billy doesn't drive, so he has no idea what's going on with the car. Like we had to call our accountant and be like, hey, how do I insure a car here? Like what's the tax situation? You know, there was so many things that growing up in Australia, you just know because your parents know, or your family
You have
knows.
someone to ask.
You have someone to ask, and it's not silly, and you know that you can trust the resource, you know, the information that they're
Mhm.
giving you. And that was like, I think the hardest is the constant mental load. And it sounds so silly and frivolous, but it's such a real thing. Like in Australia, it's very similar in the US. Like you can go to like one shop and get all the bits that you need.
Oh my God.
Like
Don't
the
even get me
cards,
started.
and like I need like a card, a thing of lettuce,
I
and like
never
you know.
I never thought I would miss a Walmart supercenter.
Oh my God.
The way
Stunning.
that I miss Asda's not the same.
Not the
Everyone says
same.
Asda's the same.
No.
It's not the same,
It's not the
especially
same.
living in the middle of Edinburgh, where the grocery stores that you can walk to are like little city grocery stores and
Yeah.
things like that. Oh, because we didn't have a car for the first like 4 or 5 months we lived
Nightmare.
here either. So like having to take a taxi
To go get
to
your
go get
groceries. Isn't that
no.
wild? It was the same as
Oh.
us. I was like, I've never gone to the grocery
Mhm.
store in a taxi in my life. Like, this is so wild. And then having to go like 8 different stores to get things, or, same, we have like a shop like in Australia called the Reject Shop, and it's just like a £1 kind of, style store,
Mhm.
but they have everything that you could need for like a last minute thing. Like, oh, I need party cups. Yep, cool. We can get those at the Reject Shop, And moving here, I was like, oh, we'll just pop over to Tesco. Billy's like, they don't
They don't have
sell
that
that there.
there.
I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you have
Yeah.
to go to the specialty store. I'm like, but why? It makes no sense to me, and the frustration that would come to that. And like, and all the other things, like, I love getting my hair and nails done, like trying to, the vetoing process of finding the good
Yes.
hairdresser and the good nail person.
Yes,
It
and
just
again,
takes
it
forever.
sounds small,
But it all
but
adds
it
up.
isn't.
It's not. It's your
Because
daily
you
life.
go from having all your go-to spots, having
Mhm.
everything figured out in your life to
Yep.
starting over. I probably went through like 4 nail salons. That sounds tiny. This is champagne problems. I
Yeah,
understand that. We get that, but it all adds
it all
up,
adds up.
and it feels so overwhelming.
And then you feel guilty because you're like, oh,
And
this
then
is
you
so
feel guilty.
stupid. It's just nails.
Mhm.
I'm like, but it's not. It's like,
It's me feeling like
what's deeper than
myself.
that? Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, all those, it's just the mental load thing. And unless you move, and again, even do I think the overarching thing is the guilt of the small things of, well, everyone speaks English in this country, so it can't be that hard. Or like, you've got people here, so it can't be that hard. Like if I was to move to Asia or abroad somewhere else, and that's like even hats off to people who
Mhm.
do that, because that's
Yeah,
even
if you have to learn a new
harder.
language to
Oh my
move to a
god.
country, I'm in awe of you.
And literally insane, like hats off, because that's crazy. But so you feel guilt for it being so simple, but it just adds up and it just weighs you down. And on days where you just want to like just roll it out of bed and just do and just know, like that is, and I think that takes like a good year or two to
Mhm.
get into that position and feel like solid. And like when I moved here, we were in the middle of the pandemic as well, so that was also like the
Yeah,
most bizarre time like to have moved, but also kind of great because the expectation universally was
was
like, we're just
lower.
chilling, like it's fine, you don't need to go out and make friends yet because nobody's making friends, and I could take it at a slow pace. But you moved here in summer, so you moved in here in like the highest
Mhm.
social, and it was also a really average Scottish summer, so it was raining a lot. So coming into the winter and it being a bit grim, I think is loaded because we've had basically a year and a half
No
of winter.
summer.
No summer.
There
So
basically wasn't a summer.
there was no summer here, because I always like defend Scotland so fiercely.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, it's so rainy. I'm like, no,
No,
our
the
summer's
summer is,
beautiful,
and that's
because it
why we
usually is.
moved. That's why we moved at the start of summer, so we could have a great summer before settling in for the
For
long
the
winter.
winter
And then everyone told us all summer, like, this is the worst summer we've
we've
had
ever
in
had.
years.
Yeah, it was literally the worst summer we've ever had. I'm like, what is happening? Oh my god, nightmare.
Something that also makes me feel guilty is when I struggle to understand the accent. It's not every accent, but there's one thing I've learned about being in the UK. There is what feels like a countless number of highly localized regional accents, and everyone knows where everyone else is from based on their accent, and some of them are a lot thicker than others.
Yeah,
And so it makes me feel like a bad person when I have to ask someone to
where
repeat
are you from?
themselves,
Yeah.
because I feel like I'm the one who's come into their country,
Yeah, yeah,
and
I
I
should
feel
know.
so rude when I have to say, I'm so sorry, what was that?
I can't understand
I
you.
feel so helpless, like especially on the phone. I struggle, again, not with every accent, but with some of them.
Yeah,
And so there's so many times where I've just in a panic shoved the phone at my husband, like,
help me.
I don't know what's
I'm
going
just a
on.
girl.
What's going
Yeah.
on? Or so there's been a few times in taxis where I've gotten in and I've said where I need to go, and then I've been asked a question, and I'm like, especially through the plexiglass at the front,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And then I feel like shit because it's on me.
Yeah, for not being
It's
able to
on me.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing
So
worse is when they're going over the cobblestones too, and like they're trying to talk to you through the window, and you're like, I've
I'm
got
so
nothing. Like,
sorry.
I'm so sorry. Like,
I'm
I'm
so
like,
sorry.
and they feel so rude because I'm like just smiling blankly at them, like no
Yeah.
clue. But yeah, I mean, it's a great accent though, isn't it? Oh my
No,
god,
I
it's got
love
so
it.
much character to it. I just think it's so great. Like, oh, I
I
love it.
really do love it. And I am glad that I'm starting to get over that hump now. I don't know if you've experienced this, but moving here, not so much in Scotland, but other parts of the UK, I've definitely gotten comments about being an American. Have
Yeah.
you gotten disparaging comments about being Australian?
Not too many. I feel like pretty lucky in the sense. I feel like Australians
Australians are
are,
pretty well liked.
we're very well liked, and
Must
like
be
just
nice.
nice. I'm like because I get like I work with a ton of Americans, and like my universal experience with Americans is them feeling bad for being American. They're like, we promise we're not an obnoxious type of American. I'm like, it's fine, like all good with me. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to worry about me. It's all fine. So I feel like I'm really lucky because
Mhm.
all like I feel like there is a stereotype of Americans who come to Scotland who are a lot like Americans. I think Australians too. We're loud. We are loud
Yeah.
people. We like to be loud. It's
But I
just,
love that about us.
yeah, I'm just like the, and this is what I love about Americans too, because they come and they
Yes.
do shoots and they're like, yeah, I want to be the main character. I'm like, yes, like let's channel in that
Yeah.
energy. Like it's just a very,
We're socialized differently.
yeah, totally. And I think Australians and Americans very similar in a lot of ways. I think Australians are also very similar to people from the UK. We've got like, I feel like best of both
I
worlds.
agree.
We've got a nice little combination, but I think that since I moved here, and I think this happens as well, and apparently this is actually related to like caveman days, that when you move to a new country or you're in a new kind of circle and things like that, that your accent will develop to mirror the
Mhm.
people around you. So I wouldn't say that I have a very strong Australian accent. I think it's quite a mild Australian accent in comparison to when I'm at home or when I'm
Mhm.
with my Australian friends. And it's so funny because my partner, if I've got an Australian friend or something here, he's like, what is that? I'm like, oh god. So I feel like mine is quite mild. So most of the time I get people ask me like, where are you from?
Mhm.
Like curiously, like unsure where I'm from. But I do feel really lucky in that sense that I don't have, I think Australians, as you said, very universally
Mhm.
liked. But I do get the main question I get, which just drives me mental, all that, why would you leave Australia for this shite country? You know, blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh my god, like I just, again, one, it's my life, so that's why I moved.
Yeah.
You know, it's on me. But I'm also like, people don't appreciate their own backyard. People don't understand, and it's the number one like argument I probably have online with people on TikTok or
Scotland is
Instagram.
shite.
Scotland is shite. I'm like, okay, yeah, but
I get that too.
you can't count your backyard as Scotland. It's exactly the same in Australia. Like Australia is beautiful, yeah, but if you live in an area that's not a very nice area, of course you're going to think, oh, Australia's crap. Like it's not very nice. Like it's just about where you are, and
Same everywhere.
everywhere in the world. But people have this beautifully glamorized perception of Australia. Oh, sunny beaches. I was like, I lived an hour and a half away from the beach. You know, I was like
Mhm.
inland Australia. There was no beach to be found. So that wasn't my upbringing. That wasn't my experience in Australia. And also going to visit a country, very different in both
From
ends,
living there.
very different from living there. And that's what like I always say to people when they message about moving over, like come and do a 6 month stint if you can. If you can
Mhm.
afford it, come and live here first and see what actually daily life looks like for
Mhm.
you, because a quick city break, of course you're gonna look at the city. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Easy to romanticize
Easy to
Scotland.
romanticize. It
But if
is.
you think that moving anywhere is gonna magically solve all your problems, you are
Not
in
gonna
for a
happen.
really harsh surprise.
Still gonna have to deal with your
Yeah.
shit.
And I see videos come across my For You page all the time of people basically just thinking, "Oh, if I move to Europe, life is gonna be so
It's
much
gonna
better
solve
and
my
everything's gonna
problems.
be fixed."
Yeah.
And I love living here. I moved here. So
Mm.
I do really, really love it here. There are things to appreciate and there are things that are not so great. And that's
Yeah.
true everywhere. Wherever you
Everywhere.
go, there you are. And also you take your own problems with you.
Yep. I think they're
So
amplified too, because you don't have
yeah,
your sounding boards. You don't,
yeah.
like, you're very much, as you said, about being alone and being by yourself. I think it really forces you to get really truthful with yourself about
Mhm.
things pretty quickly. And I think my personal development, you know, has improved so much in the last 4 years, but it was really sticky and really shit. And especially in my relationship with somebody who is, you know, Billy is so amazing. He's like great communicator, very open, very receptive. I think also like men in the UK, like people move out a lot earlier in the UK than they
Mm.
do in Australia. They move out like 18. So I feel like actually emotional maturity, at least, you know, with Billy, I think is like leagues above, sorry, Australian men, but I think it is. But like, so his capacity to handle these conversations with me and me not be my best self, you know, at times, and being just like frustrated and unable to articulate why I'm mad or why I'm angry, or like this old version of myself like comes out. And that's why I said my version of me when I moved here to now is so different. Like
Mhm.
emotional maturity is skyrocketed since I moved here. So
'Cause you just have no choice.
you have no choice, and you have to just, and like again we we're talking about like this grief and like this abandonment of a previous version of yourself, and all these ugly parts of yourself do rear up when you've got nothing else around you that's familiar or anything. You just let them kind of come to the surface, and it can feel like kind of just really yuck, you know, for a while, and like
Mhm.
being in there. But yeah, it is that romanticize it, like, oh, it's so like everything will be fixed and yada yada. And like I mentioned earlier, like it was never a point of me trying to change my life on purpose. It's
Mhm.
just I just wanted to move. But as a byproduct of that, I was like, oh wow, like that really shifted things for me dramatically. But again, I don't regret it. It was like the best thing I could have done for myself. But people need to
Yeah.
know that.
People need to know. And I've tried to be very diligent in my content since moving to show both sides of it. And I've
Mm,
actually gotten a decent amount of negative feedback on that
yeah. What do people say?
because,
Like, what's their
well, they say the number one comment or private message that I get is basically saying I'm ungrateful
right? Love that.
because, yes. So I don't want to present an overly romanticized version of Scotland.
Yeah.
Do I love the Highlands and the countryside and the castles? Of
Yes. Of course,
course.
they're beautiful.
When my husband puts on a kilt, do I go of
Of course.
course I do. But that is, Scotland has so much more to offer. And I try to show that side of it.
Mm,
But I also try to show the grief that comes with moving abroad because I don't want anyone to look at my content and think that's incredible and amazing. It'll fix all my problems
that's
and
the
I'm
only
going to do that
possibility.
because
Yeah.
that is leading people astray. And I don't want to do that.
Yep.
So I've been very open and honest about my grief and the difficulties, like logistically of moving, how expensive it was, the visa
Oh my god, the visa. Oh
process,
my goodness.
and just how difficult it truly is. But the number one negative piece of feedback that I will get is that I'm ungrateful for
Ungrateful.
it. But I think if you get it, you get it. And anyone who has moved gets it. And
Yeah.
that's why it's been so lovely for me that a lot of the people I've met have also moved, because we automatically have something in common. We understand this
Mm.
deeply emotional, grateful, this duality.
Yeah. And there's no judgment because
Yeah.
like you've gone through it, you've experienced it. And
Yeah.
I think it is funny, is it with like the whole, oh, you're ungrateful. I mean, it doesn't matter what you say, you're wrong, you know? So like if you
Like, I
are,
know that this is my dream.
yeah, you're
I
literally
know
living the
that this is
dream.
my dream. I
Same.
have had so many moments of overwhelming gratitude.
Incredible.
And I've also cried probably more than I ever have in my whole life.
Yeah. It's a duality.
Women can do both.
We can do both. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard and amazing. It's a bizarre, bittersweet experience, isn't it? But I guess that's the thing, is like when you make big choices in your life, whether it's relocating, whether it's leaving a relationship, a job, or whatever, there's always going to be both. That's life. Like it has to have both of those sides. But yeah, I agree. And I've always loved like that in your content as well, just like the transparency about, well, this is actually how I'm experiencing this and feeling it. And why I'm always, if people ask me directly, like, yeah, it was hard to get a visa, even though I'm Australian and it's like one of the easier routes. Yeah, it was hard. Like I have a partnership, still difficult. We're both self-employed people, very, very challenging to
Very
get
difficult.
a visa as self-employed people. You know, and especially it's so frustrating because Australia is part of the Commonwealth. I'm like, oh my guys, why can't I live here? Like it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's both. It's being able to share the both, because again, like my life is just so dramatically different and improved, and I love it. Like I just love my life so much, feel so grateful for it. And you do, because you can get in the sads, can't you? Be a bit like, oh god, this is awful, I miss this wedding, and I miss this, or this happened, and yada yada. And you can really sit in the sads too. I think it's being able to traverse like through those emotional roller coasters and be like, it's okay, if I'm down I'll come back up, if I'm up I'm probably gonna come back down, and being at peace with it. Like
yeah,
right.
Some of my friends told me they sent me Christmas cards, and I'm assuming the Royal Mail lost them or they're still on the way.
No.
I can't even tell you how ill-equipped I was to handle that emotion.
You really did not see this coming for me. Wow, did not think this would get me. Like, for me, it's always music, because like my mum, sister, and I would always sing in the car together, like if we were together. And so it was like Wilson Phillips' "Hold On" came on one day, and I was like, oh god, it just came out. Like it's these really unexpected moments.
Oh my god!
Like,
I went to Spayfest in July up in Falkabers, and one of the bands was doing country covers before their real set, and they played "Take Me Home, Country Roads."
Oh god!
And that song mentions parts of Virginia. I'm from Virginia, and that's referenced in the song. And when I tell you that I fully broke down sobbing in my little cowboy hat at this, Scottish folk music festival, and luckily my friends immediately recognized what was going on, so they kind of came and they all hugged me, and they hugged me for the entire song. And it was, it was a nice moment. I had a big like, look how far I've come and how far I still have to go, and I can't believe I get to do this, but also I miss home. Such an emotional moment. But the music,
it just gets
the
you. It's
music,
just got that connection. Like even like for me, like because Christmas is huge in our family, we love celebrating each other. And so when I first moved here, that was one of the hardest things. Like the holidays, of course, like birthdays, celebrations, they always set you off. And my partner's Greek as well, so like there's a lot of stuff that he wouldn't like. Greek Easter is very different to like how my family would celebrate Easter. So when I first moved here, and there was like, he didn't get me an Easter egg, and I'm like, what do you mean? Because he doesn't eat chocolate either. He's like, I didn't realize that was the thing. And I was like, oh, that's fine.
That's fine.
Like, so gonna have a meltdown over this. Like, that's fine. And the Christmases come through, and our family's always been a very Christmassy family. And this is my 4th Christmas like away from home. And this year, like I thought, you think, oh, I'm gonna get better each year, and it becomes less, and it has, like it's less stingy. It's just like it's kind of more condensed into shorter moments rather than feeling a whole seasonal like sadness or whatever. And we were like buying condensed milk at Sainsbury's, and Mariah Carey came over, and I just burst into tears in the aisle holding this condensed milk. And Billy, same thing, just knows. He's just like, what's wrong? I was like, and he's like, bring it in, he just knows that that's just it. And like, yes. But how beautiful, that you've got friendships and you've got people in your life that understand you, like, and can just, even if they don't fully like get it, just be like, it's gonna be all right, you're gonna be okay.
Even if they don't get it, they can see what's going on.
They can see you're sad.
Yeah, this was my first Christmas in Scotland, but my mom sent me a care package. So she sent a gift for myself and my husband, but she also sent a tin of her Christmas cookies. She makes the same like 6 Christmas cookie recipes every year. She bakes them for a month beforehand and puts them in the freezer and then brings them out. In December, she's constantly baking cookies, and it's always the same recipes. Yeah. And she sent me a tin of them, and she was stressed about it because she was like, she didn't want them to go off on the journey over. But I know. And so I put them in the freezer and brought them out on Christmas Day and ate an entire massive tin on Christmas Day, and it really helped.
Yeah, it
It made
does.
me feel more festive than I could have imagined. So
Imagine.
that support from friends and family back home as well. I think it would
Yeah.
have been a lot harder for me if I had had people be mad at me for leaving,
Yeah.
and I was worried with my parents, but they've actually been so
So
supportive.
supportive.
And I've told them, like, you raised an independent person, so you can't be
You
surprised.
can't be surprised.
You can't be surprised that
You wanted me to go and explore and be part of this world and do my
yeah.
thing. You like
And
flew
here
too
we
close to the
are.
sun. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's on you, actually. That's not me.
That's
Like,
not my fault.
It's not my fault.
Although my mom has already said, like, you better be home for Christmas 2025.
You've got to rotate it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or like encourage them. That's what we've kind of like, all of my family were here last year and we had them all, and Billy's family, and everyone got to meet and it was so lovely. And I was like, okay, this year I just want us two and the cat.
Mhm.
And that was lovely. And like, I think the beauty of coming over and being in a new country, especially these celebrations when you are a festive person, is being able to create your own traditions. And like, that's
Mhm.
probably one of my favorite things is like, when we sat down, we had like a friends miss like 2 weeks before Christmas. We went out, rented a place for a couple of nights and did a big roast and did Secret Santa and stuff. And we went around the group and we were all asking like why Christmas was special to them. And it was so lovely hearing everyone's reasons, like what it was important. And I realized like mine was, I love to make other people feel special and I love to
Mhm.
create the magic for people. Obviously it's like threaded through everything I do. I love to give people that feeling, that you get in special seasons or just because. And it was because my mum's always been that person,
Mhm.
she was always the person to create the magic. She'd get up in the middle of the night and make everything beautiful. And so you could wake up and just like immerse in it. So being able to like, for the baton to be handed for me to create
Yeah.
that. And even though it's not family, it's my found family, my people who are here,
Mhm.
and being able to create like, inviting people over to do the gingerbread cookie, or we have a film night or friendsmas, being able to create your own traditions. Like that's how it starts, isn't it?
Mhm.
Like, and no one really talks about that. Like, because even if you didn't move overseas, when you move out of your parents' house and you
Yeah,
have your
eventually, if you were to have
first
kids or if you eventually,
yeah, you create tradition. So it's like, we don't need kids or any of these things necessarily to make tradition, but living overseas, this is a beautiful opportunity
Mhm.
to be like, well, what do I want my Christmas, New Year's, birthdays? Like, what's the thing that Mary does, for
Yeah.
Christmas? What's the thing that Gabby does for Christmas? And it's so lovely. I think it's really special.
It is lovely. It wasn't a bad Christmas. It was an emotional Christmas, but it wasn't a bad Christmas. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about you as a self-employed person, as a business.
Yeah.
Well, now you're a business owner. You've
Business
hired
owner.
out. You've really
Yeah.
expanded. So you've said you've always been a little entrepreneurial.
Yep. Always.
Always.
Since I was a little girl. So I used to, I was trying to trace back, like, where did this start? Like,
Mhm.
where have I always been, like, quite, like, geared towards having my own business? And I remember I used to stay with my nan a lot in this tiny country town in Perth called Gamelling. And, like, I couldn't tell you how many people lived here. But there was a local pub, and my nan used to, like, work at the pub. And I used to, like, make things to go and sell at the pub. And because I was little, people were like, go on, like, have the money and take the things. So I don't know necessarily where that comes from, because nobody in my family is self-employed. Nobody's been kind of like that. So I just think it's probably the independence thing of like being self-sufficient and like wanting to make my way in the world, essentially. So I've always been that way inclined. And so when I went through school and we finished high school, everyone went to uni or college and did their thing, but I had no idea like what I wanted to do. And I was really lucky because my parents were like, don't worry about it. Don't go to uni if you don't want to. Like, there's no point in forcing it. Just go work. So I just started working and just earning money and traveling, and it took like a fair few years for me to get into a place where I was like, oh, maybe I could start my own thing. I went to like a short course for photography because I tried to apply for the full-time course and I got rejected because I didn't know enough about photography, which I was like,
isn't it the point
isn't
to
that
go
the
to a
point?
course to learn?
Yeah, I'm like, my guys, like, let me in the course. But again, love to prove people wrong. Love to prove them wrong. So I did the short course, and like everyone who did the full-time course, like to this day aren't photographers. Like, they don't do it professionally or they don't do it. So I was so like, again, trusting in the timing of life. I didn't make it into that for a reason. So I was like really glad that didn't happen. And I decided to kind of shoot on the side and do weddings and things like that and built it up over time. But then I landed a really great job as an events coordinator for a really big organization in Sydney. And I loved that job. It was really fun. I got to basically like staff in what's the word? Forget the word for it, but like just encouraging staff to like have a great time at work. Essentially, it was like everyone thought it was like a joke job because I would set up ball pits in offices so we could like do things like that, and it was a really good job. But again, I got that itching, like I want to do something. My salary's capped. I can't like do, and I want to do more. So the shoot started to pick up on the weekend, and then I was actually doing pole dancing as well for 8 years. So I was like a competitive pole dancer, and so I decided to branch in and work for the one of the biggest pole events in Australia, which is Miss Pole Dance Australia. So I was running the events there.
This is a fascinating piece of lore.
I know
I've never seen you say this on social media.
Yeah, it's very. There's a whole channel dedicated to it somewhere else on the internet. But it was really cool. It was really cool. I loved it. It was really fun, and like working in that industry, like in production. And I remember, so basically the company's called Miss Pole Dance Australia, and I was working in my full-time job, and the event ran every November, and we went with the girls from the dance studio, and we were watching it one night, and I was like, I'll be running this one year. And I literally the next year got the job, was running it. I got to have the little, like the headpiece, and like, you know, when you're like
Talking to the
talking to
microphone
them,
with
it's
the
like
clipboard.
everyone's go, yep, and we're like, and draw the curtains. It was a good moment. It was a great moment. So I was working with them and teaching dance and doing photography, and I had this juggle of all of these different kind of elements of self-employment, and just started to kind of peel things away progressively, and like until photography became the main kind of thing, and I was just doing that. So it was mainly it was a very niche mix, but it was wedding photography and boudoir photography. So it was a bizarre, but like I attracted really great clients, because
Mhm.
if you were cool with like female empowerment and like, you know, female bodies, then you're like going to be a good wedding client, you know. And I had
Mhm.
amazing wedding clients. Like I just felt like a really cool alternative brides, like doing cool stuff for their weddings, and I just loved it. And so this is like towards the end of the relationship kind of time, and I got the pull to come over, you know, was overseas for my best friend's wedding, and that's when everything went tits up, for lack of better words. And decided to move everything over to Scotland. But the initial plan was for me to go to balance between Scotland and Australia. So I do like 6 months in Scotland and then do wedding season in Australia and jump backwards and forwards.
Do you think that's maybe something you told yourself because you were too afraid to fully commit?
Probably. And like I couldn't envision like, how do I start a whole new business? I've been building this, you know, progressively for years and years, establishing my name in Sydney, all of that kind of stuff. How do I don't want to start again. Like I don't want to
Yeah.
start from you want to start from scratch. I was like, oh God, like just seems like a lot of effort. So I was like, well, if I, you know, and also the visa and like everything, and the thought of fully ripping the band-aid and being somebody who moved overseas. So when I was over here, I did like a 6 month like test the water stint, which, you know, saved lots and lots of money and just figured it out. And I bounced around all of the UK to make sure Scotland was like 100% the place. And I just fell in love with Edinburgh, and I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. Had the pull. Met Billy on that trip, who's also a creative person, and he really gave me a push to be like, your photography is good, like you need to give it like more attention, like it
Mhm.
deserves, you know, you not that like I love doing the weddings, but I had a pull to do more portraiture and like art rather than just doing the weddings and things. Not that it's not, but just something different. Wanted to like
Mhm.
level it up, and he really gave me the shove to be like, your potential is so much greater than like what you're doing at the moment. So I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, and he was very well established. It was quite a humbling moment because we matched on Tinder, and when I saw his profile, we got chatting, and he's like, oh, what do you do? I was like, oh, I'm actually a photographer. I had like 4,000 followers. I was so impressed with myself. I was like, what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm a 3D illustrator. I was like, that's cool. And like sent me his, and he had like 200,000 followers and had worked on like John Wick and Apple. And I was like, oh God, like I'm so humbled right now. Like, but he was the first person I really met who really expanded me, who I was like, wow,
Mm.
I could do so much more. And like in all of my previous, you know, experiences with partners, relationships, I was always very matched with them, which is also a great place to be. But I'd never met somebody who was like,
Mhm.
dream bigger, like you can do so much more than this. It's like, interesting. So the plan was still to jump backwards and forwards, but then the pandemic hit. So I ended up having to cancel all of those weddings in that year, and I decided to refund everybody because it didn't sit right with me not to. You know, a lot of
Of
vendors,
course.
it was a weird, it was the Wild West, right? No judgment to people who had to, you know, keep the money
Yeah.
and stuff, but it just decided to just cut the loss and pay everybody back. And move back with my parents, you know, and the plan was to only be home for that 6 weeks and start to kind of jump around a little bit, but everything went crazy. Australia was really locked down. So I was back home for 6 months instead of 6 weeks, and just made me really reassess, like, what do I want to do in my life? So had an online course, taught about 100 photographers across that pandemic period. And that helped me when I moved to Scotland, because I couldn't shoot, like, because it was lockdown, you know, you couldn't get out and shoot. So was doing a lot of online stuff, did a bit around manifestation mindset, all that kind of thing. And then nobody wanted to be online anymore because, you know, so it's just the constant pivot and constant
Mhm.
change. But upon like reflecting upon it is something that like I give myself credit, I'm very good at adapting,
Adapting.
yeah, and pivoting and changing, because you have to, you know, if you're not prepared to pivot and change in your business, then it can get stagnant. You can lose interest, other people lose interest. So that's something that I've always prided myself on, is my ability to jump through. And so I think from that, you know, in a long-winded explanation, like it's very entrepreneurial
Mhm.
mindset, is to be able to adapt to change, innovate and improve. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a wild journey.
Hearing more about your story, I can see the connecting threads, the invisible strings tying what you did before to what you're doing now. Because
Yeah.
when I look at, also for context, if people aren't familiar with your work,
Yep.
so you run the main character club in
Yep.
Scotland, and you do themed photo
Theme
shoots,
photo shoots. Yep.
and you run the main character
Main
club.
character club.
Can you
Yep.
just quickly summarize what those are?
Yep. So the main character photo shoots are basically people come travel to Scotland, or they live here and just want to have a celebratory photo
Mhm.
shoot, whether that's just because they're alive and it's just a great thing to be alive, or 30th birthdays, or a lot of first solo trips. I love working with women like on their first trips because that's a huge thing. We
Mhm.
know how it feels to move overseas or
Yeah.
travel by
I mean, I did
yourself.
mine to commemorate moving to a different
Commemorate.
country.
It's special. Like, you don't have to get married and have babies to have photo shoots. So that is born out of a love for that feeling, and also fantasy and
Mhm.
very smart, which we're all about. So letting those two worlds collide is how the business kind of came to fruition. And then the main character club, we do it's still in its kind of like exactly what it is, because we used to do monthly events, but we're kind of
Mhm.
shifting it around a little bit. We've got two kind of core large retreat events. We have main character summer camp and main character university at the end of this year, and they are events to get women again out of their comfort zone,
Mhm.
meeting new people, trying new experiences, because you take those experiences into everyday life and it boosts confidence and
Mhm.
makes adult friendships. So I love the photography and the event, so I got to basically bring the whole
Yeah,
thing
combine
together.
them.
Yeah.
What I was going to say is I can tell looking through your content and how you carry yourself online and everything that you preach that something you're very passionate about is helping women connect not only to each other but also to
Yeah,
themselves. And
100%.
when I did my shoot with you, it does feel very empowering because
Mm,
one, you encourage women to take up space and to feel beautiful and to feel confident and sexy and all these things. But then two, you're creating a space where women can meet like-minded people
mm.
and explore almost like the childlike whimsy
Yeah.
in
The
themselves,
joy,
the
like
joy of being alive.
being alive. And just I saw this great thing on TikTok. It was like, your 30s, because I'm in my 30s, your 30s are all about rediscovering what you loved as a teenager and being unapologetic about it. And like, the more I get into 30, the more I realize like how true that is. Like, looking back on like 13-year-old Gabby would just think like, I'm the sickest bitch ever, like, so cool, and the more like, even just recently, like my partner and I both like little dark souls, we like a dark film, we just watched Nosferatu, absolutely loved it. Like, and I was realizing, like, when I was like 13, 14, 15, I just loved all that kind of stuff. I was really into like a darker kind of tone and all this, and felt very much like growing up, oh, you have to grow out of that. Or that's just,
Mhm.
I remember my mom saying, well, it's just a phase. It's just a phase. I was like, oh no, like that is me. And like feeling unapologetic about it now. And so being able to give women the space to express like what they loved in their teenage years, and having a chance to dress up, to wield a sword, to fire 12, to go to summer camp, all of these things, and all of the stuff that I build and like the events that I run are basically things, like, looking back on it, things that I wish that I had attended or gone to but couldn't for whatever reason. So
Mhm.
I always wanted to work at US summer camp, but like it just never aligned and I couldn't kind of get there. So I was like, well, I'll make my own summer camp. And like, I never went to university. So I was like, I'll make my own university, So I'm like, make these experiences for women. And it's funny because like I never really did it in a sense of, again, never with the intention of I'm doing this to like the main sole purpose is to help women. I'm just trying to create a fun space, like where people
Mhm.
can enjoy themselves and do something a little bit different. And when we got to the end of summer camp last year, I didn't realize like how much of an impact the club was having on people. And like, it was a really emotional, I was like just in tears for 3 days after summer camp, because the connections that were made, the confidence that, that were boosted. And especially like, say, like for people like yourself and I, we're very independent. We do big things in our lives and we can get very used to that being very normal. So like, moving
Mhm.
overseas is a big thing, but also for us, we're like,
But
oh
it's
yeah,
me, but it
it's
also
me.
it's me.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. But like, to some people, putting on a wetsuit to go for a kayak is like the biggest thing they've ever done in their life, because they've never had a space or an opportunity to do it. Or they've literally never picked up a sword, or they've never, just really kind of unusual things that feel very normal and part of my everyday life, but are huge expanders to other people.
Mhm.
And so to be able to give them the space to do that and feel encouraged, and to find other people who like the same thing, that's
Mhm.
priceless. As an adult female, to find friendships, especially if you're self-employed or don't go to uni or anything, to actually find friendships is really, really challenging. So that's why it was part of that as well. Was like, when I moved here, same thing. I was like, how do I meet people, especially in a pandemic? No one was running events that weren't just like, let's go for a coffee and go for dinner, or like coffee and dinner. Like, I don't feel like you really connect with people in spaces like that, because you might not have anything in common, or you sit over a dinner and be like, let's find out what we have in common. If you rock up to a Hobbit picnic,
You know.
everyone is there for the same reason, and the friction is gone, because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, we all want to frolic, we
Mhm.
all want to have second breakfast or wield a sword. So it's just, yeah, it was never done with the intention
Mhm.
of like, let's like heal women and all that kind of stuff, but it's a byproduct of it, which has been a
Which is
lovely thing.
wonderful.
That's great. Yeah.
And you've recently hired your first 2 employees
Yes.
last year. That's a big step
That's a
forward
big
with
step.
any business owner.
Yeah.
I'm right about to take that step and I'm
Take the
very
leap.
scared
Oh my
because
God.
that's a leap. It's a risk
It's a
that you're
big leap.
taking on
It's
yourself.
financial risk.
It's another person's income that you have to provide.
Yep.
So you have to make sure you're stable.
Mhm.
I'm a little bit nervous to take that step. Help
Yeah.
me. What's
Help
your
you.
advice for me? Like,
My advice. Go with the vibes. Go with the vibes. So I think like as well when you're interviewing somebody, like you can, I find like I'm so gut led, right? So when I was interviewing people, and I've done this over the period of my business a lot, it's chopped and changed. But when I was doing all the weddings and boudoir, I needed an editor. So I had to hire someone back then. Then I moved to Australia, so I didn't need her anymore. So I've hired quite a few times, and I've always hired very well. Again, I'll
But you
like
like freelanced out or
freelanced out.
hired
I
contractors.
have hired contractors and I do freelancers because, again, for me, hiring a freelancer makes more sense because I weirdly still see myself as a freelancer. I love the flexibility. I love feeling motivated to work more so I could earn more money. Like, I
Mhm.
like to give women that opportunity to define it a little bit themselves rather than be like, here is your salary, you do XYZ. So for me, hiring freelancers I actually way prefer, because then if they start to feel like they're a bit tapped out, then it's easy for them to leave, or they can
Mhm.
take on other projects, because that's who I am as a person. So why would I want to hire someone else's salary? We've tried it once, I did it for a year and it kind of worked, but I just found I preferred the
Mhm.
freelancer. But when finding somebody, honestly, when people send through resumes, and I'm going through them now because we're looking to hire another person at the moment, going through resumes, the thing that jumps out to me most is like, is the personality in an email and how people like, it's really hard to explain, but some of them just like glow. They're just like, ooh,
Mhm.
that feels like a good fit. Even if maybe their skills aren't 100% aligned, I'm like, their energy is right and the vibe is right and they get me. I want someone who gets me and who's eager and like keen to work. Keenness is such a huge part of like what I'm doing. So I've never hired bad. I've never had a bad
Mhm.
person. I've always had a great like team, support system around. This is the biggest team I've ever had. I've only ever
Yeah.
had one person. So we've got two photographers, a videographer, and we're hiring another admin assistant at the moment.
That's a big
It's
team
a huge team. I was like, oh, who do I think I
for
am?
still a relatively young
It's a young
business.
business, yeah. But you need to delegate. You can only do so much, and like you have to expand yourself like by letting other people come in and let them be just as excited about what you're
Mhm.
doing as you are. And it's just amazing. Again, I only work with women because I love working with women. I love helping women become financially
I don't think I
free.
could ever hire a man
I
that I don't
couldn't
no
do it. No judgment, my
no
guys.
shade. There's like
We think
literally
different.
0.6% of the Prologues listenership is
Yeah,
male.
bless them. I don't think I had one
I
guy
don't think
apply
I,
for the job.
I
Like,
don't
I was
think I
like,
could.
fair enough.
All my pages are like 97% female
Female,
following. And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, we just get each
I
other.
know who I am. Like, I know what we're about.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being able to like help women become as well like financially like free, that brings me a lot of joy as well. So I'm hiring off vibes is my first thing. Hire off vibes. And like I just think having that flexibility in the role for people and
Mhm.
letting them grow, and like fundamentally we're women who support women, so like why would we not have that in employment with them as well? Like I want them to grow, I want them to feel like they can do new things in the business, and if they get to a point where they're like, actually I feel like this isn't for me anymore, that it's a really easy amicable end to that relationship with them.
Mhm.
So again, I pride myself on all the contracts or all the freelancers I've hired have always ended so positively because our communication has been like on point. When you've like worked at a job before and you feel guilty for calling in for a sick day, or you
Mhm.
feel shit for asking for your annual leave, I don't want anyone to ever feel that way
Yeah.
with me. So I use that to like impact my like employee. I don't know,
Give someone else a positive working environment.
literally, why not? Like,
Yeah.
why not make a fun environment? I'm just like, this is what our generation is all
Yeah.
about,
I
like
do think
fun
that
at
I would
work.
make a good boss because I've
Really?
worked so many jobs.
Right.
It's like the last thing I want to do is to have someone dread like
Dread working for
working for
you.
me.
Exactly. So that's why vibes are important. It's such a like unprofessional like advice to give, but I mean, it's never led me astray.
Well, so but how do you decide to take the risk on yourself? Because I think where I'm at right now is struggling with self-doubt and feeling like my business isn't big enough. I don't, oh, you don't actually need the
Ooh,
help. Like
Michelle.
if you worked harder, you could get it all done yourself. I'm at that stage where I'm trying
Yeah.
to convince myself that actually this will benefit me. I deserve it.
Yep.
It's possible. But I'm like trying to take the leap.
Trying to take the leap. I still feel this even now, and I have 3 people working for me. I'm like, do I really need another admin
Yeah, but how many
assistant? How
shoots did
many?
you do
I know it's
last year?
crazy. Like, okay, last year was 60. That was a chill year. The year before was 111. So I was like,
That's
it was fucking
crazy.
crazy.
What's that? That's like two a week,
Yeah, it
two
was
plus a
mental.
week.
It was insane. And they never, they were all in October and September because autumn in Edinburgh is like supreme, but it was crazy. But the thing is, like, you could probably do it yourself. Like, you can probably maintain it, but you're never going to level it up. You're never going to expand it. It's never going to grow into what you
Mm.
want it to be. And why shouldn't you delegate the things that you don't really like doing? Every job has elements that you don't like doing, whether it's the administration or it's the inquiries or it's whatever it is, like calendar management. There's always going to be elements of the stuff that you don't really like doing. And the time that you free up by allowing somebody else to do it allows new ideas to drop in, for you to record more podcasts, for you to approach new brand deals, for you to
Mhm.
create new content. Like, the space that opens up in your life is
Mhm.
unbelievable, but it's also terrifying for a brief period because when I've hired people in the past, I've gone through like a slump of like, oh my God, everything's taken care of for me. So maybe
Yeah.
won't do anything. And then you're like, oh God, like now there's no income coming in the business. And that's a learning as well. You know,
Yeah.
very much that's a fear that I brought into this next round of hiring people was, well, I know in the past that I've then gotten a bit lazy because I'm not constantly under stress, but sitting in that little space of discomfort and being like, oh, what does come up for me? Like when I have, you know, I don't have 10 galleries to edit and I don't have 800 emails to respond to. And that's when ideas like camp came
The
up and
creativity can
it can
breathe.
breathe. Even I'll give an example. So over the end of the year, I was doing like an Unravel the Year workshop. So somebody that I followed for a really long time, I always do her like workbook on like wrapping up and introducing the new year. And this is the second time she was ever running a online workshop. And I was like, oh, like I'll go to that. It was like £30 or something like that. That's great. So I jumped on that call, did something for me because I had space in my calendar because I had Natalie doing my edits and I had admin taken by, you know, it was all had space to actually do this thing for myself. Sat on that call and I was like, I want to do this as well, but for the main character with a fantasy edge. So I'm going to run this workshop on like rewriting your 2025 story. I'm going to do that because if I have 30 people, sorry, if I have £30 per person, I have 100 people coming in that, it's $3,000 that I'm about to make for running an online workshop. And I
Wow.
have space to do it. Like when you put it that way,
That's crazy.
it's crazy. Like it's crazy. Had I not had the space to think about that and then have the time to put the workshop on and create the content, I literally would have been currently £3,000 less. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like because of that, so it sometimes it can take a while for the benefits to show up, but because I had that time allocated to Natalie and paid her to do the work that was taking up all of the space in my brain, it allowed so much room for something new to drop in. And you just have to trust yourself because you've done it so far. Look what you've created without any help.
Mhm.
Imagine what you can create with help. Like it's crazy. And you get to help somebody else be like to pay somebody. How great is it to pay people? You're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like they get to live a life that they love living and get to like work with you and like, oh my God, they'll be buzzing to work with you. Like the energy and you'll bounce off them. Like honestly, if you hire right, you find the right people, it only expands. Like I've
Mhm.
never felt like I've gone backwards or
Okay.
I've always earned more.
Okay. I'm hoping and I'm planning that 2025 is a year of investing more in myself.
Invest more.
Even just like now I have a podcast editor for season 2
Game
and
changer.
I enjoy recording so much more knowing that I don't have to edit it.
This is the thing. So
Sam, I
that's
appreciate you.
yeah, Sam, we love you.
We
But
love
that's
you,
a live
Sam.
example, like of somebody letting somebody in to help you. It's like a win all round. You get so like you free up time to record more, which you love to do. This is your zone of genius, right? So you free up that time. You get to employ somebody, so they get money, brilliant, and your audience gets more content because of it. It's literally like
The way that you're making a lot of sense right now.
that's what
She's
I'm
making
saying.
a lot
That's
of
what I'm
points.
saying.
She's making a lot of points.
It's only going to benefit
Yeah,
you.
and I think it's probably not just me that needs to hear this. I have a lot of entrepreneurs in my audience, and I feel like we all need to hear this
Just hire
right now.
someone and don't let somebody else tell you that like, oh, you could probably do that yourself. Because I've had people say, again, love to prove people wrong. People go, oh, but you know, you could probably take up that work on your own. I'm like, yeah, I probably could, but I'm going to be more stressed and it's not going to be the best quality of work and everything. And like male, if you were sorry, like if you're a dude and you're like, oh, I'm going to hire an assistant, they'd be like, great move.
Yeah.
Like why is it not
Yeah.
the same? You know, it's never the same. So I'm fierce about that. So you know, like
But we're just conditioned to keep ourselves small.
yep, and not like don't be too
And you have
much
to like
and
when you're self-employed, you have to fight against that instinct every single day.
every
And I've
single
been doing
day.
this for full time for over 3 years now, and I'm still reminding myself that I'm allowed to be proud of what I do.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to invest in myself.
You're allowed to earn good money.
I'm allowed to make
You're allowed to
money.
make money.
I'm allowed to take myself seriously. A lot of people don't take content creation seriously, and
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is the hardest job in the world whatsoever, but I'm also allowed to be proud of the fact that I work hard.
You work
It might
hard.
not be the hardest job, but I can be proud that I work
You
hard
work hard.
and I try my best. I guess to wrap up, because I do have so many people who are interested in moving abroad who are listening to this episode, do you have one piece of advice for anyone who is considering it? Or do you have any piece of advice for someone who wants to take the risk on themselves and have their own business?
Oh my God, both very good ones.
/ anyone trying to work up the courage to take a risk on themselves.
Take a
really.
risk. Yeah. I think in general, because I feel like both of those, like whether you're starting a business or moving abroad, ending a relationship, it's all a risk. But I just think it's so cliche, it's cheesy, but like literally this is the only life you're given. It's the only
YOLO.
one. YOLO, literally. And I know, but it's cheesy. It's like it's a thing for a reason, right? Because I often forget, like even in a life that I constantly take risks and change things and all of that kind of stuff, no one else is coming to do it for me. Like even if I want to like book a trip, I'm like, okay, well I have to go do that. Like if I, want to go to Norway. I was like, oh, Mary's going to Norway. I want to go to Norway. Lovely. Like no one's going to come and
You
do
need to
that
go to
for
Norway.
me. I'm going to go. I
Just
think
like,
we are
I
thinking about
literally
it.
need to go to.
I need to
I've
look
had so
so
many people
gorgeous.
message me being like, your Norway trip, maybe. Visit
Literally.
Norway needs to run me a check.
Visit Norway, sort this out. Like
that post got like over
Oh my God, it was
400,000
insane.
likes.
Visit Norway's tourism went up. Like
And on my YouTube vlog, people are like, my family, my parents called me after watching that vlog and they were like, we think we might need to go. So, sorry, visit Norway.
Visit Norway.
Let's talk. Anyway.
It was literally so prevalent in my brain at the moment. But yeah, like no one's gonna come and do it for you. Like you really have to like be in your own corner. You're gonna have to do it, and people aren't gonna get it. People aren't gonna understand, but that's fine because that's not their journey. It's not their life. It's a lot easier for everybody else to shit on what you're doing than it is for them to to check themselves and go, ooh, maybe I want to make that big change. Maybe I want to do that. So I think like throughout this whole thing, throughout this whole journey, and as it continues on, like this independence or this like security in myself of like I can do anything I put my mind to because I'm the one who's in charge of it. I'm going to take the action. I'm going to do those things. And I constantly prove myself and other people wrong because of it. And it's really nice to have a great support system. It's really great to have great people surrounding you. And I think that's a huge part of it as well. I do think it's really important. But at the end of the day, like it's you. And you've got to just go for it and just put these things into place and make shit happen because literally no one's going to do it for you. And there's so much gratification in like reflecting on something and being like, I took that risk. I did that. And like, look what I have to show for it. And I honestly think that a big risk is it never has a negative like overall impact. You might have temporary discomfort and like emotional, like as we've discussed, like crying constantly and that kind of thing. But in the grand scheme of things, whenever you take a big risk on yourself and a big risk on your life, it always pays off, and often in ways that like you never know. And my favorite thing to kind of go by in my life is like I'm open to surprise and delight. I'm so open to seeing, like I never thought that this was going to be my reality, like again telling 13-year-old Gabby that I would be where I'm at now. I can't fathom this. So like what else is in store? And there's so much excitement. So despite all of the hardship and the struggles and all of the things that come with big change and big risk, the thing that always like that little emotional pull through for me is like, what's next? Like very excited. Like what could it be? So that would be my advice.
I love that you said open to surprise and delight. Open to letting the universe show you some love.
Show me some love. Like thank you, universe, more please. Like show me how good it can get. It just gets better and better from here. I've always been like a universe manifestation girly, and it just continues to show up and like prove me right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, yeah, take the risk.
Take the risk.
Just go for it.
I think mine would maybe be the time is going to pass anyways.
True.
I love that phrase and I think
phrase.
about it all the time. So if you're worried that starting a business will take time to build up or moving to a different country will take you a year or two to adjust, the time is going to pass anyways.
Literally.
You're not getting any younger.
Wouldn't you rather be doing
towards
it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny because obviously you're at 8 months and I'm 4.5 years in, and at 8 months for me, it was starting from scratch as well. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like if I think about, or like my overall entrepreneurial journey has been a 10-year experience. I've been a photographer since I was 21. I'm now 33 this year. So like coming up to 12 years. It's a long time if you think about it in that way. But throughout this time, it hasn't felt long. Do you know what I mean? For that reason, I'm like, well, the time is passing anyway, so I may as well work towards my goal, and it's going to be hard or whatever. But like looking back on it, I'm like, it feels like just gone, and now I'm here. I'm like, oh, it's great. Like, the time is going to pass, but if you put it towards something, it will compound interest and it will be so worth it in the end. So I love that one as well. It's going to pass anyway.
Time is going to pass anyway.
Do something fun.
So tell us, one, what is next for you? What's coming up for the Main Character Club and Scotland Magic? If people are interested in your events or interested in booking with you, how can they do that? And also along with that, where can we find you?
So we've got our summer camp coming up in August, but sold out. Sorry, guys. She's sold out. We have Main Character University in November, which is very like under sealed lips at the moment because still coming. And we have a main character community coming as well. So wanting to connect girls from all over the world into the space, which I'm really excited for. So best to just keep an eye on Instagram and our website. So MCC Scotland. That's where everything will be updated. And the same with the shoot. So I'm taking on a lot less this year. So I'm only working with 30 people this year, which is exciting. Wow. But we have 2 amazing photographers and a videographer in the team that have been trained in the main character way. So if anyone's coming to Scotland and just looking to step into that energy and just do something different this year and just like really put themselves like first, then come and find us. We're a joy.
They are. It's a fun time.
It's fun. It's meant to be a bit of fun. So
it's really fun. Like I said before, it really helps you feel whimsical.
And
I enjoy that.
Whimsy.
I don't feel whimsical enough as an adult, and so I like that.
Whimsy in 2025.
More whimsy in 2025. With Main Character University, is there a wait list for that? Or
There is a wait list for it.
Okay.
Yeah, so wait list. So there's currently as well, like, to took me to toot the horn, but there's 600 people on the wait list for a 30-person event.
Oh,
So
wow.
good luck, good luck to you. But we're hoping to bring like tons more. This is why we're
And more
hiring
coming
again.
2026 as
Yeah,
well.
so definitely more in 2026. We're gonna have a Hobbit picnic again this year. Like that's a plan. So we had one in September last year. So there's lots of stuff coming. But again, like I've mentioned, I like to go with like what I'm feeling in the energy,
Mhm.
so all the events feel very like authentic and very
Didn't you do
exciting.
like 30 events in September or
We
something?
did. So we did 30 events in March last year,
Wow.
like basically every single day, and I was knackered. Like I've never been more tired in my life after 30 days. Someone commented on TikTok being like, "Hey, you're gonna do that again?" I was like,
No.
absolutely not. Like it was amazing, like unbelievable, but I was like, never again. So I'm loving these kind of 3 to 4 day immersive experiences where people really get to like just completely like let go of every of their worries and just come and just have a great time and be whimsical. So
That.
yeah, more of
And
that.
you also share a lot about your journey moving to Scotland as well on social media.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed this episode and you want to continue hearing more about that and about Gabby's journey, you do update, I would say fairly regularly, you
Yeah.
talk about your journey.
More of that coming. I think
Yeah.
that's something I want to share about more in this year and just be like, again, I think because I'm at a point where I've been here for quite a while, I've got more to reflect upon and more to share with people. I think for me, when I was in the throngs of it, I was so unsure and the business wasn't solid and everything. So I feel like really excited to share more about it this year. So Scotland Magic is where you can find me for all that stuff. So yeah,
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on Prologues and
thank
sharing your
you.
story. So many different pieces of what you said resonated with me, and I know they will resonate with the audience. I feel very in tune with the Prologues listeners, and I know that they're going to love this. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to Prologues, and I will see you next week.